cash. He pulled the U.S. out of the anti-Israel UN Human Rights Council, where the world's worst human rights violators routinely vilify the world's only Jewish state. He signed the Taylor Force Act into law, holding the Palestinian Authority accountable for its cash payments to terrorists, and he appointed a truly outstanding ambassador to Israel, my friend David Friedman. The President now has the opportunity to take another major step to advance American interests and to fortify the U.S.-Israel relationship by recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. The Golan Heights is essential to Israel's security, a strategic high ground along Israel's borders with Syria and Lebanon. The Golan's topography grants Israel with an observation and intelligence capabilities that allow it to detect enemy activities. It also offers incredible defensive advantages in repelling an attack. Allows Israel to defend critical segments of territory like the Sea of Galilee and Haifa Bay, serves as a major water source and as a growing population center. The importance of the Golan is illustrated by Major General Giora Eiland, the former head of Israel's National Security Council, who wrote that, quote, Israel does not possess a plausible solution to its security needs without the Golan Heights, end quote. Israel's need for the Golan Heights is clearer than ever given the threats it currently faces on its northern border. Iran has escalated its aggression against the Jewish state to unprecedented levels in recent months, launching direct attacks on Israel from Syria. In May, Iranian forces in Syria fired approximately 20 rockets at Israeli military positions in the Golan Heights. In February, Iran sent an armed drone into Israeli airspace. Iran has also equipped its terrorist proxy Hezbollah with advanced weapons, including over 100,000 rockets and missiles aimed at Israel. And amidst the chaos of Syria's civil war, terrorist groups, including ISIS, have gained footholds along the Syria border with Israel. We can only imagine how much worse the threats to Israel's north would be, and threats to the security of the broader region would be, if the Golan was in the hands of what remains of the Syrian regime or Iran or Hezbollah or ISIS. It would leave Israel's enemies in control of that high ground and station even closer to Israel's heartland. Now, this past weekend, we saw Hamas launch nearly 200 rockets at Israel, a stark reminder of the consequences of Israel's withdrawal from Gaza. Hamas's latest attack demonstrates why it's so important that Israel keep the Golan Heights. In Syria, Bashar al-Assad's government has launched a ruthless campaign to retake the country's south, backed by Iran and Russia. The Syrian dictator has slaughtered his own people in his desperate bid to cling to power. Countries including the United States, Britain, France, Germany, and Canada, as well as the UN, have all made clear that the Assad regime has no legitimacy. The U.S. should push back against Assad and Iran and Russia's expanding influence. President Trump's action in ordering airstrikes made clear that Syria's use of chemical weapons would not be tolerated. The President can further U.S. national security interest and send Assad, Iran, and Russia another strong message with the stroke of a pen by recognizing Israel's sovereignty over the Golan. Recognizing this claim is also the right thing to do. Israel won the Golan in a defensive war in 1967. It repelled another Syrian attack there in 1973. 1981, with the passage of the Golan Heights Law, Israel permanently integrated the area as part of its country, and today the Golan flourishes as a growing center of agriculture, industry, tourism, and wineries. But other nations have yet to recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan, despite the fact that its acquisition of the area in a defensive war was consistent with principles of international law. And it's clear that without the Golan, Israel would not have secure and recognized boundaries free of threats or acts of force, as UN Security Council Resolution 242 calls for. By recognizing the Golan as part of Israel, the U.S. would send a clear message that Syrian belligerence will not be rewarded and that Israel's victory over its aggressor has consequences. As Prime Minister Netanyahu said, the time has come after 50 years for the international community to acknowledge that the Golan Heights will permanently remain under Israeli sovereignty and that whatever happens on the other side of the border, that line is not going to change. The case for recognition now is clear. Such a move would bolster Israel against the threats on its northern border and repudiate the Assad regime's butchery and Russia and Iran's designs in Syria. It would recognize the reality that Golan Heights is part of Israel and is vital to its national security. With the current state of Syria, the prospect of peace negotiations is non-existent. But the current danger Israel faces from Iran, Hezbollah, and other terrorist groups like ISIS makes clear that, given the instability in the Middle East, Israel could not afford to give up the Golan under any circumstances. Israel's security should be non-negotiable, and so should America's commitment to it. It's time to stand with our ally on the Golan and against these common enemies. This is a policy that the President should implement and that all members of Congress should support. And I would note that we do have a great panel of witnesses here to discuss this issue. So I want to thank all the witnesses for coming and providing their views. Under no circumstance, just think how crazy it would be to say that Israel should give the Golan to Assad or some of these proxies. It would be absolute madness. So let's discuss this issue today. And before we hear from our witnesses, I'd like to recognize the ranking member, Mr. Lynch, for his opening statement.